Hey guys, it's Kay from KS Anonymous, and I am back today with another Reddit video. Today we're actually going to be looking at some posts from r/SupernovaRevenge. Now, honestly, I'm probably not going to do another one of these unless it's extremely highly requested, just because I don't think it's quite my cup of tea. However, it was requested by Trainer Awise, which happened to be my 312th subscriber, and I decided why not. So we're gonna go ahead and do this today. I do want to warn you, in case you're not familiar with SupernovaRevenge, that it can be a bit dark, so if you're easily triggered by those sorts of things, you might want to just skip this video and go on to another one. I got to reading these and remembered the epic story of revenge that my granddad got after a guy tried to decapitate my dad. So a thing to note is that my granddad was a brigadier general who took part in the Allied invasion of Italy and was an excellent strategist who had the respect of everyone in town. However, he raised a family of smart mouths. So in 1974, my dad was in high school and lived in a small town in Massachusetts. And like his older siblings, was a smart mouth and a bit of a troublemaker. Called in bomb threats to get out of school sort of thing. Well, one day, someone vandalized the house of one of the teachers. Let's call him Mr. P. Not sure exactly what happened, but I think it was something along the lines of trashing a garage and throwing paint all over. Mr. P had long hated my family, as my aunts and uncles and dad would mock him because he wasn't a particularly intelligent teacher, and his students would often correct him. For some reason, Mr. P was convinced it was my dad who did it. He would have probably blamed my aunts and uncles too, but they were all in Vietnam at the time. And for whatever reason, he had this genius idea to try and kill my dad in response. My dad has always been an avid motorcyclist, and at the time he would frequently give girls rides right past Mr. P's house, and he liked to go fast. One night, after a school function, a dance I think, my dad was giving a girl a ride home, and her place was 2 or 3 houses down from Mr. P. He dropped her off and was starting to speed off home when he noticed a metal wire strung across the street between 2 poles right at neck height for anyone riding a motorcycle. It was pretty obvious that this trap was meant for him, and had my dad been speeding down that street like normal, it likely would have decapitated him. Needless to say, my dad was both freaked out and ticked off. He rushed home to get my granddad and show him the wire. My granddad was normally a calm and collected man who had seen a lot and had a military stoicism, but upon seeing the trap laid out to kill his son, my dad said he was more furious than he had ever been in his life. They went to all the houses in the area and got everyone's attention and demanded to know who set the trap. They found out it was Mr. P when someone told my granddad that Mr. P had mentioned something about getting revenge on Dad for vandalizing his house. When they confronted Mr. P, he didn't deny it, and my granddad promptly punched him in the face, knocking him out, and they went home. When they got home, my granddad interrogated my dad, demanding to know if he was the actual vandal. He was not. Mr. P was disliked by many of his students, and we never learned who actually did it. With that settled, my granddad said that he would destroy Mr. P if it was the last thing he did, and he would end him for having the nerve to try and kill his son. At this point, my granddad started planning his personal war on Mr. P, but I'm not super sure of all the details because he intentionally left my dad out of much of it, so I only have what my dad was involved with and what we found out later. What we know is that my granddad reached out to a number of contacts who served with him in World War II, told them what happened, and recruited them for Operation Black Paint. Yes, that's what he really called it. First, in the summer of 1974, they broke into his house and sabotaged the plumbing, causing a toilet on the 2nd floor to flood poop water all over, and the local plumber who was in on the operation while fixing the pipe did something that caused the hot water tank to explode a few days later, further wrecking Mr. P's house. This apparently happened during a rough time in Mr. P's marriage, and these stresses apparently pushed it over the edge and they got divorced. And while he doesn't have proof, my dad believes this was part of the plan. Later that year, just as school was starting, my granddad had someone remove the lug nuts from Mr. P's car, which predictably caused him to get into an accident. Mr. P was uninjured, but his car was wrecked. He was still broke from having to do the repairs caused by the plumbing incidents. Without a car, he frequently struggled to get to and from the school, and my dad would laugh at him driving by on his motorcycle while Mr. P walked to work. We also know that my granddad turned him into an alcoholic, leaving bottles of booze on his porch with a note saying things along the line of, "Heard you were having a rough time. Here, take the paint off." Throughout the school year, Mr. P was growing increasingly stressed and depressed, and his alcoholism began to show. In about March of 1975, my granddad gave my dad a bottle of scotch and told him to put it in Mr. P's desk at the school on the promise that my dad would get a bottle for himself. He did, and that evening, the principal got a call saying that Mr. P had been seen drinking on the job. Mr. P was fired after they found a half-empty bottle of scotch in his desk. Jobless, carless, recently divorced, depressed, and alcoholic, Mr. P decided to try and sell his home and start over somewhere else. My granddad also made this hell, as he had several people look at the house and had them sabotage it further while there, such as pouring glue into the kitchen sink and locking up the garbage disposal, salting the yard, and causing various small bits of damage to the property, while complaining at the poor state of the place. Eventually, Mr. P gave up selling it and just walked away with only the clothes on his back. My family sort of lost track of Mr. P for a few years before finding out he was a homeless wretch on the streets of Boston and was still a raging alcoholic. In the February of 1978, with a historic snowstorm bearing down on them, my granddad found Mr. P under a bridge where he confronted him, told him that he was the one who had destroyed his life and why. He then poured a soda onto Mr. P, walked away, and proceeded to let him freeze to death that night. Okay, so again, I'm just gonna say that this is not my cup of tea. One, obviously Mr. P shouldn't be trying to decapitate people, but at the same time, this family was awful to him anyway, and then took it, in my opinion, way too far. But this is SupernovaRevenge, so I guess, you know, what do you expect? Backstory. To preface, this story begins 15 years ago, when my brother was 17. My brother was never bright and always got into trouble. However, I was the complete opposite. I was a small little nerd who always stayed in my room doing homework or playing video games. I would go out with my brother from time to time, like going to get food, etc., but on this night, I was out at McDonald's. We were eating when he said, "After this, let's go do something." Now, I was completely oblivious to what he was going to do, but he was older, so I just followed him. Not that I had a choice, since he also drove me here. I was following him when he walked up to a Dodge Charger and smashed the window and put a large dent in the car with a bat he kept in his car for self-defense. After breaking the window, he stole a pretty expensive pair of sunglasses and walked away casually like nothing happened. The car alarm started going off, so he started to run, and of course, I ran too. I didn't want to be the one blamed for damaging the car, so he got in his car and drove off. When he got home, he told me I could tell no one. For the next 4 years, he would constantly harass and verbally abuse me. He would punch me, hard, constantly, so I would be afraid to tell anyone. Then one day, I will never forget, he beat me almost every hour of that day. This was during spring break, so I was off school while he didn't have a job. Finally, he punched me, and I snapped. I instantly punched him back, breaking his nose. He cried out in pain, then I kicked him hard in the stomach, breaking a rib. Once he regained his breath, and he wasn't hurting so much, he pushed me up against a wall, so I kicked him in the balls before he could do anything. He sat there on the floor, in pain, and I was thinking what to do next. I thought I had done too much, but then I remembered the constant abuse. The pushing, the punching, the verbal abuse, and the time he broke my leg after I threatened to tell my parents, all for the Dodge Charger he smashed and broke into. I charged full speed at him, knocking him down the stairs. He flew through the air before finally landing, breaking his neck and damaging his spine. My mom called the ambulance and he was taken away to the hospital. It left him unable to walk or practically move for the rest of his life. I was interrogated by the police, but it was declared an act of self-defense. And if you think that I feel bad for my brother, I have absolutely no remorse for him. I find it really sick what this brother did to them. This is one of those situations that I do think, in a sense, it really is self-defense, because if he wasn't injured to that point, would he have ever really stopped? Like, you don't know. So, I mean, was it far? Is it a little creepy that they don't feel any remorse? Maybe, but then again, they were abused, so I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comments below. I would like to start off by saying that when I get angry, I get furious. My sister calls it Hulk mode, where I get huge doses of adrenaline. My rage does not mix well with the fact I don't mind watching people suffer. I'm not saying I'm a bad guy, I help people when I can, but if someone does me or someone I care about wrong, I enjoy their pain with little to no remorse. Anyway, onto the story. I am pretty much the unofficial caretaker of my youngest sister. Let's call her LS, little sister. I'm 17 and she is 6, but as her big brother, and me looking around early to mid-20s, I'm constantly mistaken as her dad. I always walk her to and from school. Her elementary school is about 3 blocks from the high school. I do schooling online, so there are constantly kids my age walking by our house. Now, I love my little sister more than anything in the world, and am very protective of her. We love playing together and building snowmen in winter. This is exactly when the incident took place. We live in Indiana, so we get some crazy snow. We were building a snow person family while I, the big strong brother, would pretty much stack the snowmen on top of each other while LS balled them up. I never leave LS alone outside for more than a few seconds and always keep an eye on her. We have a fenced-in yard, so it should be fine, right? Me. Keep playing. I'll go get some hot cocoa. LS. Yay! QPOS. A kid I knew well, but never had the pleasure of meeting. As I make the hot chocolate, I hear LS crying. I just figured one of the 4 snowmen fell over or something like that. Me. LS, calm down and come here. The hot cocoa is ready. She doesn't come and doesn't stop crying, but then I hear laughing. I step outside, freezing cold with no coat. There were 3 kids, all around my age. We will call the one I knew from school SH1, SH for being craphead. The other ones will be 2 and 3. The snowmen were destroyed, sticks and scarves thrown everywhere, but that wasn't important. SH1. Well, isn't it Humpty Dumpty? Is this your dad? Asking LS. LS doesn't answer, and I guess SH1 doesn't like that. He slaps and pushes my little sister with a strike to the face. Her nose all red, she falls and hits her head on the sidewalk and starts screaming, blood coming from the back of her head. At first, my heart stopped. My first thought and biggest fear was brain damage. I rushed over to LS and tried to pick her up to take her inside and call an ambulance. SH1, 2, and 3 had walked up behind me without me noticing. I was too distracted. As I started to lift her, SH2 grabbed my arms, causing me to drop LS, luckily into the soft snow this time. Me. Let go of me, you mofo, she's hurt! As SH2 held me, SH3 picked up a pile of snow and just piled it on my little sister's face. By now, my little sister wasn't screaming. It was a weak whimper, and I was so scared she was going to die. Black. Most people say they see red or time slows, but not me. I knew exactly what I was doing, but it was like I was watching it on TV. I bit SH2 on the thumb, drawing blood. He yells as he lets go and jumps back. I lunge forward. Now, I'm fat. I'm 6 foot on the dot and about 330 pounds. But I've also played football my whole life and knew how to use my size. I slammed into SH3 as hard as I could, taking him to the ground. I was on top of him and was bringing the hammer down. I don't really know how many times I hit him, but he lost teeth, shattered his nose, and lost eyesight in one eye. My knuckles were shredded raw, but I had so much adrenaline in me, I didn't feel it. In fact, the only reason I stopped was because I heard a thump. I didn't really hear it, I felt it. Then I felt liquid trickle down the back of my head. Blood. SH1 had hit me over the head with a brick. Now this hurt after the fight, but again, when I have adrenaline pumping through me, I feel nothing. I charged at him as he raised the brick again. He must not have expected my speed with my size, because he jumped back and hesitated. I didn't. I slammed him into my dad's truck, which was parked on the roadside. He dropped the brick and I punched him in the gut. He bent over and I lifted my knee to meet with his face. He falls to the ground. I pick up the brick. I walk beside him and put it on the sidewalk. I put his hand on the brick, no resistance from him. I stomped as hard as I could. He screamed, louder than anything I've heard. I do the same with his other hand. SH2, after seeing his buddies pummeled, ran. Turns out, he called the cops and said I killed his friends. I walk over to LS, who was breathing, but it was weak. I called an ambulance, but the only thing I muttered was she's hurt and our address. When I hang up, I pass out. I woke up handcuffed to a hospital bed and not knowing what happened. Apparently, I broke multiple bones in both my hands and needed stitches on the back of my head. My little sister was fine, she had just lost a lot of blood. SH1, 2, and 3, not so lucky. The only thing I did to SH2 was bite his thumb. I guess I didn't know that I almost bit his thumb off. SH1 had serious hand injuries, needing multiple hand surgeries on each one. I later found out he lost 3 fingers and can't use his right hand. But SH3 got the worst of it. He lost his sense of smell, lost eyesight in one eye, bit a hole in his tongue, fractured his jaw, lost multiple teeth, fractured his skull, and had major swelling on the brain in which he barely survived by the skin of his teeth. At least, the ones he has left. After a bit, a nurse came and checked up on me, saw I was awake, and went to go get a cop. The cop came in and asked me a bunch of questions, and I told the truth. I don't know, it was black. He then uncuffed me from the bed and said that they watched our security cameras and, while a bit excessive, I acted in self-defense of myself and others. Some might ask how I can describe the fight so well if it was all black, unreal, like watching TV. Another good question would be about the beginning where I said I enjoyed others suffering if they deserved it. To answer both those questions, I have the security recording. The police took the footage from the monitor, but the camera also gets sent to our phones. I love watching it. I've probably watched it a million times. I only have 2 regrets about the whole ordeal. I let SH2 get away with only a small injury. My last regret? I don't think they suffered enough. The footage showed the fight lasted less than 1.5 minutes. I wish it would have been hours. Okay, so these people that attacked this little girl that maliciously are complete and utter pieces of trash, in my opinion, and he did act out of defense for them both. The only thing that I think is a bit disturbing is how pleased he is seeing them being beat up in retrospect and wishing it was longer. I mean, that's a little bit dark, but I understand that they really hurt his sister. So that's actually going to end today's video. If you enjoyed it, go ahead and drop a like. And let me know what you think of these. I'm not sure about ever doing SupernovaRevenge again. It just makes me feel a little uncomfortable. Pretty dark stories that kind of end up in that subreddit. But I hope that the person requesting this at least enjoyed it. I'll see you all again in my next video. Bye!